So just to let you know a little bit about who we are, the NMC is the nursing and midwifery regulator for the 4 nations of the UK. So what we do is ensure that there is safe and effective nursing and midwifery education and practice across the 4 countries of the UK. So we regulate that, and we put fairness and equity at the heart of everything we do. We work by ensuring that every single registered nurse or midwife or nursing associate has benefited from effective education, so we set those standards. We also ensure that every nurse and midwife on the register meets clear standards of conduct and practice, and that's about protecting the public and the reputation of those professions. And finally, as a regulator, we have a duty to investigate concerns and to take steps to protect the public in the relatively rare instances where we need to limit or restrict professionals' right to practice because something has gone seriously wrong. So that's very different from something happening in the workplace that the employer can deal with in the standard way as a sort of as a standard conduct or performance management issue. We're here for when things go badly wrong. So that's what we do. Why are we transforming our culture? So in the summer of 2024, to sort of come to Sarah's original point in her piece about actually not going on vibes and really understanding what's going on in your organisation, in July 2024, we published an independent review into the NMC's culture, which was led by Nazir Afzal and Rise Associates, and we commissioned that report in response to whistleblowing allegations that involved racism, bullying, and a culture in which colleagues were afraid to speak up and to voice their concerns. So more than 1,000 current and former members of staff, more than 200 of our panel members who work with us and sit on our fitness to practice hearings shared their experiences, and the report was published, and it found a link between our regulatory performance, the work we're here to do, and our culture. And in particular, there were challenges with the caseload in our regulatory processes, in these fitness to practice processes, and that was putting some of our employees under immense pressure and also contributing significantly to the stress of the registrants, the nurses and midwives who were going through those processes. So really, really serious situation, and I think not a misuse of the expression a toxic culture. The report really highlighted the fact that there were 2 different worlds in the NMC. So there was a phrase in it which really stood out to so many people who read it, that you could pass a colleague on the corridor and be living a completely different experience. So one might be on an upward career path, having a great time with a great boss and a great career in an exciting profession, and the other might be experiencing really serious bullying or discrimination or racism in the workplace. So 2 really, really different worlds. So last year, it is last year now, yes, last January, we had a change of leadership. So Paul Rees came in initially as interim and now as the permanent chief executive and registrar. I was hired last January. I'm the assistant director for culture transformation. Almost everybody you see on this slide has been hired in the last 12 months. So we have a very, had a real refresh of the executive direction team and also a new chair of council, Ron Buckley-Smith. So Paul and Ravi, who is my direct boss and leads our people and culture directorate, are really the driving forces and sponsors behind our transformation. When Paul arrived, he ran a series of listening events, to come back again to Sarah's point. So more than 800 of our colleagues took part in those. And based on the review and what we heard at those listening events, we put together a culture transformation plan. It's a 3-year plan. Oops, a bit too soon. It's a 3-year plan, and it's built around 6 strands or pillars of work: strong and effective leadership, values-based decision-making, embedding equity, equality, diversity and inclusion into our workplace and our practices and our processes, creating psychological safety, enjoyment at work, and regulatory fairness. And that last strand is really about eliminating disparities for people going through our processes. So as part of that work, we've introduced a coaching culture, and more than 300 of our managers and leaders are taking part in a rolling coaching program, really starting to equip them with the tools and skills that they need to help transform the culture. So really taking a continuous improvement approach to how we work. So we also have some very ambitious ED&I targets, and in relation to the workforce, they're really focused in on pay gaps, and in relation to our regulatory processes about debiasing decision making, and ensuring that people get a fair and equitable hearing if they find themselves in our processes. So I want to talk to you about two different things that we've done for the rest of the talk to give you a flavour of what we're doing. So we accepted 36 recommendations following this independent review, and one of them was to take a look at our values, because we had values. They clearly weren't being lived, but we had values. They were on our website. So take a look at your values, reshape them, and really try and embed them into your organisation. So one of the first pieces of work I did was to lead a values consultation with all of our staff, from our council and our exec, all the way through the workforce, and we settled on 5 values that we wanted to use to really drive the transformation of the organisation. And they really are intended to define who we are and how we work together. And so once we'd created the values, we also built, with my colleagues here today, a behaviour guide, Living Out Our Values, which we published and handed out to all our staff as well. And this is a key part of what we're trying to achieve. So the values and behaviours are really explicitly defined. Just going to see, yes. So here's a view from within the booklet of the value of equity. So we've really set out very clearly to our employees what these values mean and what they look like. So they shape how we treat each other. They're more than just words on a page. This sets out the behaviours you can expect from the leadership, the behaviours we expect to see from our employees, and also the behaviours we don't want to see. And that's a really important column, and it's giving people real clarity about how to performance manage, how to call out the behaviours we don't want to see in meetings, and really how to try and shift the culture. And our appraisal process now has a dual lens, where your performance is considered not just based on what you do, but also whether you're meeting it and demonstrating the values. So really trying to embed that change. The other thing I wanted in 90 seconds to talk about is how we're measuring our progress. So we've built something called a maturity model, and we've looked at all the pillars of the programme, and we have created a model for each of the pillars, and you can see we're sort of down at the initiating stage, and over the course of the 3-year programme we want to be able to track our progress. Obviously we're aiming to get to leading practice. We certainly need to be embedding by that point, and so we've set out, and this table shows you sort of what we would expect to see at the end of each year of the programme. So at the end of year 1, in this example, some evidence of ED&I and equitable approaches, some systems in place, diversity is seen in terms of demographics and targets in place. By the end of this year that we're in, we want it to be woven into decision-making processes, influencing all our policies and practices, and by the end of the 3rd year, that it loses a distinct status as separate sets of initiatives and is really embedded into a demographically and cognitively diverse workforce. So we've really set out what good looks like and how, in the final column, we'll measure it each year. And we've just done our first pilot of that programme. So we've piloted how we're going to do the measurements with all of our directorates. We've established that people really are in the initiating stage. Some directorates are in the process of really trying to understand, for example, reasonable adjustments experiences. Others, there's inconsistent application. Some feel that the work is becoming more embedded. They have pockets of good practice, but it's not yet consistent. So what we're trying to do with this is really embed a mechanism where every quarter each directorate has to talk about the culture. And it's as simple as that. So in everything we're doing, we're trying to say this is in the way we work, it's in the things we talk about, it's in the day-to-day. You know, you don't get a bonus if you've gone from initiating to developing faster than the directorate next door to you. You get a bonus for having a really good and regular, deep and insightful conversation about how things are going and reflecting on that and thinking about what the next things you might do to improve the situation. So really happy to share more about that if you're interested.